Hi, my name is Sam, and today we are going to master the JavaScript ternary operator. So, if you are relatively new to programming, you may have come across the ternary operator and been really confused about what it is because, on initial first look, it does look weird and it does not look like something that really logically makes sense. So, what am I talking about? You may have seen something that looks like this. So essentially you have something, and then you have a question mark, and then you have something else, a colon, and then finally some third thing. So really, what the heck is this, right? What is going on with this? Today we're just going to take a quick overview of the ternary operator, and we're going to look at how you can use it, when is appropriate to use it, and also look at some places where it's probably not best to use the ternary operator, because it is pretty common that once you learn a tool, you overuse it, right? If you get a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. So we'll go through some of the use cases where maybe the ternary operator is not so appropriate. So really, let's get into it. The ternary operator is essentially an if statement. So if you're familiar at all with JavaScript and using an if statement to say, if some expression is true, then do something, else do something else. If you're familiar with that logical branching of the if statement, then really you already understand the ternary operator, and you just need to get familiar with the new syntax. So really, the ternary operator is a shorthand. It is a way to write an if statement with a lot less boilerplate code, right? You can basically get an if statement in a single line even, which can, in a lot of cases, be really convenient. So let's take a quick look at a couple examples of how you can use the ternary operator to clean up your code and write more readable, nicer code for yourself and for people that you might be working with. All right, so let's assume for a second that we have a really basic if statement, right? So this is something that hopefully you are familiar with, right? So let's just say that we have a Boolean variable that we have set to true. And just to be clear, I have a JavaScript file here that's on my machine, and I'm just going to be running this JavaScript file through Node, so that we can see the output. We could also use like the Chrome Developer Tools console or things like that, but really I'm just using Node because it supports the latest version of JavaScript and it's pretty easy. So we have a Boolean variable vegetarian, and we essentially want to have another variable that we might use elsewhere in our application that we're going to call meal. So basically we want to check, right? We want to say if this variable vegetarian is true, right? Then we're going to say that the meal is equal to broccoli. Right? Otherwise, right, if vegetarian is not true, then we're going to say that the meal is equal to steak. Okay. So if we just console.log out meal, just so we can test to make sure that this works, I'll save that. And then in my Node console, I'm just going to go ahead and load that file, which I've called ternary.js. So you can see that the output that we get from this little code is broccoli. And again, the reason is because we have set vegetarian to true. Our if statement evaluates vegetarian. It evaluates to true. And so this first branch executes and we assign the string broccoli to the variable meal. And then we're just consoling out meal. So really basic, right? So let's just take a look real quick at this and identify some ways in which this is maybe less than ideal. So really, it's pretty verbose, right? I would say generally speaking, the if statement is pretty verbose, right? We have like 7 lines of code here. We're repeating, right? We define meal, but then we're assigning it in multiple locations. And if you're familiar with if statements, you also know that you can have else if, right? And so we could have maybe multiple instances where we're saying else if this, and then we're assigning meal, number of times. So we're duplicating the variable name, and generally speaking, the syntax is pretty verbose. So really this is where the ternary operator comes in. Using the ternary operator, we could really easily rewrite this if statement and get it down to a single line, right? Which would be really cool. So let's take a look at how that might work. So instead of having this, right, we could say that meal, right, what is meal? Well, meal is equal to something. And what meal is equal to is going to be dependent on the variable vegetarian, right? So if vegetarian is true, then we're going to say that the meal for this is broccoli, right? Otherwise, right, if vegetarian is not true, then we're going to say that the meal is steak, right? And so I'm going to just log out meal again. And actually, you know what we'll do? So we have this first log here, right, for meal. In this case, meal is based on vegetarian being true. So let's mix it up a little bit. And after we log that first meal, we're going to set vegetarian to false, right? So now vegetarian is no longer true. So we're now saying meal is equal to, is vegetarian true, right? In this case, vegetarian is not true, right? So if vegetarian is true, it's going to be broccoli. Otherwise, it's going to be steak, right? So now that vegetarian is false, we're going to have meal be assigned steak, right? So let's test this out again. So we'll console.log it the first time when vegetarian is true, and then we'll console log it again when vegetarian is false. And I'll just clear my console here, and we'll run this again. So you can see that the initial value we get for meal is broccoli because vegetarian was true, and then steak because vegetarian was false. So really, what the heck is going on here, right? Basically, we know now that this ternary operator is basically shorthand for the if statement, right? But let's actually just break down ternary operator and take a look at it in more depth so that you really just understand and can really master what this is, right? So the first thing is ternary, right? This thing is called the ternary operator. So it's important to understand what ternary means, right? Ternary actually is defined as meaning composed of three parts, right? Made of three parts. So it is an operator that is made of three parts. Interesting. So the other word in the title or in the name of this thing is operator, right? What the heck is an operator? Well, you're probably familiar with operators if you've done any level of programming. Operators are things as simple as A plus B, right? C minus D, right? So in this case, operators are plus, minus, right? There's tons of other operators. You know, the multiplication operator, the division operator, you might know the modulus operator, right? But these are all operators, right? They're really common, they're used everywhere. And actually, we could also refer to these as binary operators because all of these operators, like the plus symbol and the minus operator, they take two operands, right? They have an operand before them and an operand after them. So you can really think, and this is like a little bit of a tangent, but really like an operator is almost like a function, right? It's a special kind of function with a special syntax, but really we're kind of calling a function the plus function, and we're passing in two parameters, right? A and B, and we're getting some return value from that. So you're very familiar, if you've done any level of programming, with operators, right? And probably most of the operators that you've seen have been binary operators, meaning that there's an operand, there's some value in front, and then there's the operator, like a division operator, and then there's some other value afterwards, and then that evaluates to something, right? So really, the ternary operator is just another operator, like the plus operator or the minus operator, except it's ternary. So it actually has three parts, right? It has, instead of being a binary operator like A plus B or C minus D, this is an operator that takes three things. So from that standpoint, it's easy to remember, like, what is a ternary operator? Well, it's an operator with three operands instead of two. All right. So let's actually take a look at how the ternary operator is constructed, right? So the first thing that we have is a condition. And that condition is evaluated to true or false, just like in an if statement. The first operator in the ternary operator is the question mark, right? And so what comes after the question mark is the expression, right? So what comes after here is actually an expression, the first expression, which is executed if the condition is true, right? So if the condition that we pass into the ternary operator evaluates to true, then the first expression is executed and we return from the ternary operator, right? Otherwise, right, then we have a colon, and what comes after the colon is another expression, right? This is expression 2. And basically, if the condition evaluates to false, then we skip the first expression and we jump right to the second expression and evaluate that. So again, kind of keywords here. If you're really going to master the ternary operator and understand what's going on here, we've got a few keywords, right? So really, the ternary operator, ternary means composed of 3 parts. We have the operator keyword, right? An operator is something that you're very familiar with. It's kind of like a special kind of function, like the plus operator, the minus operator, the division operator, the ternary operator, that performs some kind of really low-level math-related function usually. And then we have operands, right? The operands are the actual kind of parameters that we're passing to this operator function kind of thing. And then we have a condition, right, which is evaluated to either truthy or falsy. As a segue, if you're not familiar with truthy and falsy in JavaScript, you should definitely check that out. True and false are Boolean values, but JavaScript has this fairly weird thing it does around value conversion, coercion, I'm sorry. So basically, this condition evaluates to either truthy or falsy, and depending on that, either the first expression is run or the second expression is run. Cool, so let's continue on. All right, so we've taken a fairly simple look at ternary operator and how it can be used. Let's do another example just to make sure that we really understand how it can be used. So in this example, I'm going to define, actually, I'm going to assign to variables a few functions. All right, the first one is going to be say hello, and this is going to be a simple function that just console.logs hello. And I'm going to define another function which is called say bye, and that's going to be a function. Say bye is going to be a function, and we're going to console.log bye. Okay, and we're going to define another variable called friend, and friend is going to be set to false. So we so far, right, in our previous example, have seen the ternary operator essentially used for assignment, right? We've used the ternary operator as a shorthand to assign some value to a variable. And that's a really nice use case of the ternary operator. But there's also the expression or execution version of the ternary operator where we're not actually assigning something to a variable using the ternary operator. We're actually using the ternary operator to just execute logic in our application. And so that can be a really, again, nice way to use a shorthand to have branching logic in your application without having to write an if statement. So in this case, we've written 2 really simple functions. We've got a variable that's set to false, and then basically we want to just say, if friend is true, then say hello. Otherwise, say bye. So as you can see here, we're really not assigning anything, right? We're just saying when the JavaScript interpreter gets to this line, it is going to ask the question, does friend evaluate to true? If it does, I'm going to execute, because we're invoking say hello here, I'm going to execute this expression. Otherwise, I'm going to execute this expression, say bye. So, what might you expect here, right? Again, we've basically declared these functions. These functions log something to the console. We've said friend is false, and then we've got this ternary operator here. So if I go back into the node console and we execute our file again, we'll get our broccoli and our steak from before, and then we'll get bye. So as you can see here, this is not using the ternary operator for assignment. This is actually using the ternary operator to execute different logic based on a condition in our application. So this is another really nice use of the ternary operator. Again, if we were going to use the if statement to write this, we certainly could, but it would just be more verbose. And this is very clean and clear once you understand the syntax. All right, so let's take another quick look at how you can use the ternary operator to essentially mimic an if-else-if scenario, right? So far we've just taken a look at the ternary operator in terms of an if-else statement. But we can actually also use the ternary operator to take care of use cases where we want to have an if-else-if something else, maybe even else-if something else, and then a final else clause, right? So let's take a look at how that would work using the ternary operator. So I am going to create a little more space here. And we're basically going to define a variable age, and we'll say that age is 20. And we're also going to define a person type variable, but we're not going to assign that anything yet. So a naive implementation, right? We could say if age is greater than 17, then the person type is adult. Else, if the age is greater than 12, then the person type is equal to a teen. And finally, if the person is 12 or younger, then we're going to just say that they are a kid. Nice. So let's just log this out and make sure we didn't make any silly mistakes. So if I log out person type, I'll save that, and I'll clear out the console and we'll run this, and we'll see that we get adult. So this is totally fine, right? Nothing wrong with this at all. We've set age equal to 20. We've defined that there's this variable called person type, and then we use an if-else-if-else branch to assign person type the correct string type. So let's look at how we might do this same thing using the ternary operator. So first of all, we basically can start with assignment, right? We're basically saying, I want to assign person type a value based on age, right? So the first condition that we're going to pass to our ternary operator is age, right? So just like we did above, we're going to say if age is greater than 17, right, then person type is going to be assigned the value adult. Otherwise, and here's where we get into the else if, right? So if age is greater than 17, then person type is getting the value assigned to it adult, right? Otherwise, we're going to make another check, right? We're going to say if age is greater than 12, then we are using the question mark, then we are going to assign person type the value teen. And then finally, we'll close, we'll say else, we're going to assign the person type the value kid. So really, this is the exact same logic that we are doing above here in our else if branch. we are actually just using the ternary operator, and this is essentially what's called a nested ternary operator, right? We're basically having a ternary operator inside of a ternary operator, and you can actually do that to infinity if you wanted to. Maybe to make it more clear what's going on, we could do this, right? So basically, we have the normal ternary operator, we have our condition. If that condition evaluates to true, then we're going to assign the value of adult to our variable. Otherwise, this whole thing executes, right? So we still only have a third operand in our ternary operator. But in this case, our third operand, the third thing we're passing to our ternary operator, is another ternary operator. And so if age is not greater than 17, we are going to run another ternary operator, and the first part of that ternary operator is going to be to check if age is greater than 12. And if it is greater than 12, then we are going to assign teen to person type. Otherwise, we're going to assign kid to person type. So this is a little bit convoluted and confusing maybe, but once you see what's going on here, it's really not, right? And I was just using the parentheses to make it a little more clear what's going on. My recommendation is that if you are going to use nested ternary operators, which in a lot of cases is fine, like in this case, I think it would be totally appropriate. The way that you structure your code, your syntax, can really make a big difference. So I would argue that this is actually a bit hard to read. And so there's actually a pretty common pattern in the JavaScript world, which is to basically break out your nested ternary operators onto new lines. And it can really just make things more readable. So let's take a look at what this might actually look like. So this is, I hope you can see the difference. Just by breaking that long nested ternary operator that was on one line into 2 or 3 lines really makes this more readable, right? So now we can see that in our first branch, if age is greater than 17, then we're assigning adult. If age is greater than 12, if this is not true, right, then we're going to check if age is greater than 12. If it is, we're going to assign teen. Otherwise, we'll assign kid, right? So now, again, let's reset age to be 13. And then we'll console.log out person type again. All right. So we've changed age to 13, so we would expect our last person type log to be teen. So I'm going to clear out my console again, and we see that the last value we get is teen. So that's really sweet. So you've seen that we can use the ternary operator in a nested fashion as well, and that can be really, really handy. All right. So we've taken, some fairly simple looks at the ternary operator and tried to understand what it's doing. So now, before we finish up, let's just take a quick look at times when you should not use the ternary operator. And we got into this a little bit in our last example where we showed how you could nest ternary operators, right? So basically you could say if something is true, then do this. Otherwise, run another ternary expression, right? Another ternary operator. So in simple cases where maybe you're doing assignment, variable assignment, like we had in our age example, it can really make sense to take advantage of that. And if you organize your code well and you use the syntax where you kind of break the nested ternary operators onto new lines, it can also be pretty readable and not confusing. But the ternary operator can definitely be abused and overused, right? If you want more information, you can go on to like the Mozilla Developer Network and look at some of the more complex nested examples for ternary operators and how you can actually have functions inside of ternary operators and multiple executions inside of ternary operators. So really, ternary operators are pretty powerful. But most of the time, they do not make code more clear, right? And most of the time, it does not make sense to try to be fancy or, be cool and show off that you can use the ternary operator when it really obscures the meaning of your code. So generally speaking, the ternary operator is great for shorthand variable assignment, like we've seen. Anytime that you get into branching where you have fairly complex logic being executed in each of your branches, probably just stick with an if statement, because the ternary operator, while it is shorter, can just lead to very confusing syntax. And again, it just does not make your code more clear. And in the real world, when you're writing business code, or if you're freelancing or doing something like that, the name of the game is code clarity, right? You want other developers and yourself in the future to really know what your intent was, what you were trying to do. And part of that is good commenting, but part of that is also just not being a dick, right? Don't just use language features to show off or because you can, right? Really just use the feature that makes your intent the most clear. So in a lot of cases, the ternary operator does not make intent more clear, and it can definitely be abused. So just keep that in mind as you use it. So let's just look at a couple really practical examples of where the ternary operator is not super valuable and actually can be kind of technically incorrect, right? So let's look at one example again. I'm going to say that we have another, right? We have this age variable from above. So we're going to just say that age is equal to 20 again. And we're also going to have a new variable called is adult. And we're not going to assign that anything yet. And we're going to do another check. We're going to say if age is greater than 17, then is adult is true. Otherwise, right, is adult is false. So if the age is greater than 17, then they're an adult. Okay, again, that's fine. We know now that we have a better option though, right, which is that we can use a ternary operator for this assignment, right? So we could say the ternary operator, the first condition that we're passing in is age is greater than 17. If that evaluates to true, then we are going to assign true to is adult. Otherwise, we're going to assign false to is adult. So you may be thinking, that's awesome, right? We've cleared up our if statement and we've used a ternary operator. We're now doing this assignment on one line. It's very clear and easy to read. That's great. Totally true. But the reality is that we could also just write is adult is equal to age is greater than 17, right? The way that coercion and assignment works in JavaScript will say that if age is greater than 17, if that evaluates to true, then is adult will get the value true, the Boolean value true, right? Otherwise, false. So really in this case, it is totally unnecessary to do either of these options, and we can actually just shorthand this down to this, right? So I guess the takeaway there is that generally speaking, if you're doing variable assignment using true and false, you probably don't need to use either an if statement or the ternary operator. Another example could be when you have like this kind of case. So this is, there's no code to back this up, but this is just an example. So say we're defining an action, right? So we want to say if there is a user action, right, then we want the user action. Otherwise, we want some kind of default action. So again, pseudocode, this is not going to execute or anything. But really, our intent here is that we're saying, if there is a user action defined, then I want it. Otherwise, I'm going to default to some other value or action, right? So again, this is not technically incorrect, but this is also not a great use of the ternary operator, right? We could actually, and I'll comment this out, we could actually more we could better define our action by just using a shorthand, right? So we have in JavaScript an OR operator, a logical OR operator, the two pipes. And so this basically says action is equal to user action, unless there is no user action, unless user action evaluates to falsy, in which case I'll assign action to the second part, to the default. So, while we could technically use a ternary operator in this case, it doesn't really make sense because, again, if our goal is to avoid code duplication and all of that, right, this is silly. We're duplicating user action here. The logical OR operator would be a much better choice. So just a few examples of where you might not want to use the ternary operator. So today we have reviewed the ternary operator, and I hope that it's at least a little more clear to you what the ternary operator is all about. At the end of the day, it's really simple. It's basically just an if statement, but you should learn the vocabulary around it so that you can talk intelligently about what it's doing, right? So a ternary operator, it's ternary because it has three operands, right? It is an operator like the addition operator, the subtraction operator. It's basically kind of a special function like other operators, but this one takes three parameters, so it's a ternary operator. The ternary operator begins with a condition, right? And that condition is evaluated by the JavaScript interpreter. And if that condition evaluates to truthy, right, then the second piece of the ternary operator is executed. The first expression passed to the ternary operator is executed. Otherwise, the second expression, the last parameter, is executed. If you found this video to be helpful, definitely like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.